I apologize. In 5 minutes, the minister is going just outside to say hello, and in 5 minutes we will be here. I apologize for this.
Θα κάνω το ίδιο, δηλαδή έχω κάποιους ανθρώπους που αρέσουν να τους συζητήσουμε. Άρα,
Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. This session, as you know, is about the cross-country immigration in the Eastern Mediterranean and the relative issues that we face. So, the first one who's going to be in the podium, say, Vice, is Mηταρακη, known as Mηταρακη, who is a Greek politician. He serves as Minister of Immigration and Asylum. He is a member of the Hellenic Parliament of Chios with New Democracy. He was a president of the Council of the European Union, Foreign Affairs and Trade during the Hellenic presidency, and he is a former Deputy Minister of Economic Development and Competitiveness. Minister, the floor is yours.
Admiral, thank you so much. I think Greece is changing in a very pro-business way. I've spent 15 years of my life in London, where sort of being on time is of essence. Here in Greece, things in the old days would start now or late, and everybody would find that normal. And the Admiral started by apologizing for being 6 minutes late. It's a signal that the country is heading in a good direction. So we're getting more organized, more competitive, more productive. I've been asked to say a few words about migration. And obviously, migration is a challenge that affects the entire world. I just came back from the US, in New York. A key topic of discussion now is the migration pressure that the US is receiving. I was in London a couple of weeks ago, key political issue in the UK, the flows arriving into the United Kingdom. In the European political agenda, the topic has jumped at the top of interest in a number of European countries. And it's actually starting to have an impact in domestic politics, affecting people's choices in the elections. So it is a critical issue that we need to discuss and find ways to address. Displaced people from a number of causes, including war, famine, climate crisis, is on the rise. UNHCR expects hundreds of millions of people may need to be relocated in the years to come. Obviously, the Western world, if I can use this word generically, needs to do more to resolve global inequalities, as well as events like the lack of democracy and respect for human rights in many parts of the world. But this does not mean that the solution to such a crisis can be irregular migration. And it is my job in the Ministry of Migration to ensure that we reduce the number of irregular arrivals to Greece and the European Union. We need to avoid what I call the abuse of the asylum system. The Geneva Convention was written for a good reason, to protect those people in need, moving directly from a point of risk to a point of safety. But the Geneva Convention is not an encompassing tool to resolve all global inequalities. And we see today smugglers taking advantage of people for enormous profit. People smuggling now is the biggest smuggling business in the world, much larger than smuggling of drugs or other illegal substitutes. They're making fortunes by transferring migrants, undertaking extreme risk, as we see sea fatalities, especially in the central Mediterranean route nowadays. They transfer migrants between countries which are safe countries, like signatories of the Geneva Convention, countries which are members of the Council of Europe. As I stated recently in Geneva at the 73rd session of the Executive Committee of the United Nations High Committee for Refugees, it is critical to preserve the integrity of the asylum system, providing asylum to those in need, but actively discouraging asylum shopping. We need to provide shelter to those entitled to it, but we can't allow smugglers to come and select who comes and lives in Europe. We need to work in a more coordinated way. I think Europe has sent a very strong signal when in March 2022, we decided to open our borders for people coming from Ukraine. Given the fact that this is a war at the borders of Europe, it was critical, and that's exactly the spirit of Geneva, to open our borders and Now, millions of people have come temporarily to the European Union, and Greece has already provided shelter for 75,000 people in the last few months. As it is today, many would argue that the European asylum model is broken. As arrivals, most of the arrivals do not originate directly from countries at risk. And it is, as I said, the smuggling networks that come to decide who comes to live in Europe. On the other hand, Europe does have the need for workforce. We do have the need for people to come and live in Europe, but we should do that in a legal way. And I think we're not doing enough to provide legal pathways to the European Union. And Greece is among the countries that has established a number of platforms to allow people to come and work in Greece, or come as investors, or come and study, or come for other legitimate reasons. What is happening today, it's causing first reception countries like Greece, like Italy, like Spain, like Malta, like Cyprus, which together will have formed a group within the European Union called the Med5, which are facing uneven, unfair pressure. And I have to remind you that in 2022 is a year of extreme arrivals for Europe. Greece is seeing an increase of 80% compared to 2021, but we're still at the second lowest level of arrivals in the last 10 years. We've seen an enormous crisis in 2015, 2016, where over 1 million people came through Greece to the European Union, an event that led the European Union to agree with Turkey, the 2016 joint statement, where Turkey undertook the responsibility to protect its own external borders, something that it does with varying success, and at the same time accept the return of those not entitled to international protection to return back to Turkey, which is something that unfortunately is not happening to the extent we expected. So this year we expect around 14,000 people to come to Greece. This is on top of the arrival we've seen in the year before. But at the same time, we have seen arrivals in the European Union in total to be at record levels since 2016. And that caused a lot of considerable political debate in the European Union as we're trying to agree on a new pact on migration and asylum, the 27 EU member states. A new pact that, according to Greece, needs to find a balance between the responsibility of frontline member states and the solidarity that other member states need to be able to provide. But more importantly, with the new pact on migration and asylum, we need to find ways to reduce the overall arrivals in the European Union by focusing, for example, on the external dimension, working closely with countries of origin and countries of transit to reduce irregular migration to the European Union. When it comes to Greece, we have done a lot over the years. We have seen an enormous pressure in 2015 to 2019 that led to many overcrowded camps around the country. We have been able now to reduce the number of asylum seekers residing in camps from 92,000 people at the end of 2019 to 18,000 people today, to 34 camps today from 121 camps we had a few years ago. And also we are able to provide now camps that meet very strict European Union Asylum Agency standards. So now we provide for 34 camps that meet this appropriate level of standards, both for the benefit of asylum seekers, but also the safety, the security that is needed for the protection of asylum seekers, our staff, and local communities. Thanks to technology and the hard work of our team, we're able to reduce our asylum backlog. Now Greece has the most productive asylum service in Europe. We went down from 202,000 pending applications 3 years ago to 25,000 today. We should be at zero by early 2023, end of first quarter, as we're also digitizing now completely our asylum process. From arrival to application, to card registration, to final delivery of decision, everything will be paperless. And that's a system that many EU member states are now looking at, a program that we have developed in-house with the help, of course, of specialized companies at the Ministry of Migration. We have done a lot to protect unaccompanied minors. We had over 5,000 unaccompanied minors in Greece 3 years ago. We work with 13 European member states to relocate around 1,500. Some kids grow older and now they're in semi-independent living facilities. The remaining children now in Greece, they're no longer kept in police custody like we did for 20 years, are no longer kept in camps in the islands, but all in specialized centers. So we are doing our part to provide an effective, efficient asylum system, in line with the obligation that Greece has under the Geneva Convention and international law. At the same time, we do not want to be the gateway to Europe for illegal smugglers. And that's why we are investing in protecting our external borders by using technology, by using the personnel and staff of the Hellenic Navy, the Hellenic Coast Guard, the police, in order to prevent smuggling networks from taking advantage of the European Union. As I said at the very beginning, it's a very complicated issue. It is a very sensitive issue. It affects people, so we need to be very cautious as we formulate policy. We need to be able to provide for the shelter that the international law expects us to do, but at the same time, migration needs to be functioning more in a legal and organized way. This was my initial thoughts, Admiral and members of the panel. I'll be happy to answer questions at the end. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the information provided us. Is there any question? I have a question. I have a question.
Your question.
We know the current situation, how it is today. Thank you for the information. What is the estimation for the future, and how do you see the technology can help your ministry? Thank you.
First of all, we're using technology in many fronts in the last 3 years. Our camps have become much safer places, thanks to technology we use for entry-exit systems, for complete electronic files of people in the asylum system. We use monitoring technology to ensure that we don't have incidents like the fire of Moria again. You may recall that in September 2021, the camp of Moria was burned. It was a disgraceful place. It was built initially for 2,500 people. It ended up hosting at some stage 25,000 asylum seekers, which meant that 90% of the people was outside the perimeter of the camp. Obviously, none of our staff could have access to that extremely dangerous location. You could see the preparations for a day to start the fire, but no one was there to witness it. So we're ensuring now in the new camps we have the technology and the artificial intelligence in our technology to ensure we're able to monitor both locally at the 34 camp, but also centrally in Athens, what is happening in the camps. Of course, we respect the privacy of people and the privacy of their homes and the privacy of residential accommodation areas, but it's an important technology. I said before we use a new system which we think is pioneering for Europe, the completely paperless asylum system. So people arrive, they get registered, they have an application on their mobile phone, automatically they get assigned to an interview, when they get notified through their phone. So their phone, they can communicate in their language with the central office, so if they need to change something, they can do through a messaging system. They go to the meeting, the interview is recorded digitally, the templates that help our officers to prepare the decision. The moment they press final, it gets digitally signed, archived, and delivered through the application to the mobile phone of the asylum seeker. So it does take months now to find them where they are, and have a lot of staff that's working on that. So that's another technology we use. Now, when we go to the border technology, as you know, both the Hellenic Coast Guard and the Hellenic Police are constantly upgrading the system they use for the protection of our external border. There is in progress I don't know what's the English terminology, the SOFTE project, the one that the Hellenic Coast Guard and the Ministry of Mercantile and Marine is working on, which is being funded by the European Union for the protection, the electronic corridor for the protection of the sea borders. Equally, the Hellenic Police is investing further at the physical barrier in Evros by extending it and by adding technology on that. So yes, technology is very critical. We're looking also to incorporate technology in some parts of the interview process to help us identify better nationalities and confirm evidence provided to us. So overall, technology is a critical thing for us. Now, overall expectation for the years to come, I think the pressure will not subdue everywhere in Europe. The root causes of migration obviously will not disappear in the years to come, and there's a lot of people that would like to come and live in the European Union. I can understand it from any individual's point of view, and to some extent something which we should encourage in a legal and organized way, but we can't accept that again we could experience 1 million people arriving through Greece in 1 year.
Please, Lynn.
Thank you very much. It was an interesting discussion and a significant improvement that you talked about. How much EU help do you get with the technology, with the concepts? You've mentioned that you have the most efficient system, and it sounds extremely efficient. And I can very much understand how the rest of the community could use it, our country too. But do you get much support from the EU on this area? Thank you.
We get a lot of support in some areas. For example, the European Union operates two major agencies. One is Frontex for the protection of the external border, and one is EUAA, the European Union Asylum Agency. So both of them provide for human capital on the ground and systems and training, so that's very useful for our staff. Some of the projects the projects I described about our own camps and our digital asylum system, they were Greek ideas, originated in-house from the team. We were able, through a tender, to find suppliers to come and help us with the development of this project. I think this is something that other EU countries may be interested in, and from outside the EU, we have had colleagues that came to Greece for two things. One is this new model of these close control centers we operate in the islands. It's a concept we devised in Greece with separate neighborhoods, with one external fencing, but with separate neighborhoods within, so you can safely have single males, families, nationalities, unaccompanied minors in a very secure area, so people from the outside cannot visit unaccompanied minors at any time. Even my identity card, I have a passport that works throughout Greece. I can go at any door and go in. I cannot go to unaccompanied minors areas, which you would understand I shouldn't go. So this is the overall security of this camp, and the architecture of this camp is something that many countries are looking at. They're looking at also at our asylum and digital technology, and we will be happy to share with our partners. And on funding, yes, we receive considerable funding to the EU. We expect around 1 billion in the next 7 years.
Any other questions? Please.
Minister, I see that the immigrants that they are in the camps, they are moving in the Greek society free, and they come back to the camps. I would like to know if there is a policy to assimilate the immigrants in the Greek society, and what are the measures that you have taken?
First of all, the word assimilation is a very difficult word. For people to move to a society, it takes many generations. So you're not helping them to integrate. I mean, for them to become productive part of the society and the economy, I think that's the objective. In order to sell the identity, it will take generations. People that are in the camps are free to move around. In the camps in the islands, mainly, we have a rule that we close the camps immediately. So people have 12 hours a day to move around, 12 hours for the safety of everyone. We close the camps. This, though, comes up for people that have been there for a few weeks. Then when they move to the mainland, if they are recognized refugees and they have an identity card, they no longer live in camps. They have the right and the obligation, I would say, to find a job. There are immigration programs we run, especially with the International Organization of Migration. We run the Helios project. Around 40,000 people over the last 3 years have registered for Helios. It's a program that helps them find a job, learn the necessary skills, business type skills, the language skills, and also there is a rent subsidy for a short period to help them find their own house. and you see people now finding jobs in Greece. Also, we see a large number of people, which is the biggest percentage of those that have arrived in Greece in the last 7 years, moving to other EU countries. And this is why maybe in the summer we also had the deficit of people, especially in rural areas, where farmers were needing additional help, and they couldn't find, because many people have moved on.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Thank you. I would like to ask the Minister, we know that Africa is a traveling area, and we should expect big migration routes that will lead to Greece in the coming 10 years, perhaps. How are we preparing, because capabilities and technologies are not going to save us from the millions of people that will want to come to Europe? How are we preparing, and perhaps how are we going to pursue the European Union that we need a European approach to this and not just burdens migration ourselves?
First of all, to be fair, millions of people have come to Europe over the last many years, and they will keep on coming. And many Europeans have moved to other continents. I mean, migration is not an unhealthy thing. I lived in a number of countries. Many people in this room probably live more than one country in their careers and life. The way is how you do that in an organized and structured way. Now, when it comes to asylum, it's very clear. You help those people that under international law are in need of protection. But this is a limited number compared to those that need to move. Now, for the rest that they need to move, obviously we need to have some organized pathways, legal pathways. And we do need these legal pathways. Sometimes we do not want to admit it, but we do need it for our economy. At the same time, and I think that has been an aspiration of the European Union for many decades, and of the United States and other major countries, of supporting development programs in countries like countries of Africa to prevent the economic and social causes of forcing people to migrate. Protecting your borders for irregular migration can work and should work, but it should be a part of a strategy that you alleviate the pressure in other countries. If you have enormous global imbalances, this is not something you can manage eventually. So you need to prevent severe global imbalances, and at the same time, you need to provide opportunities for people to come. And that will justify them having a stricter stance against those that want to break the rules. Thank you.
Any other questions? Till we complete the first. Mr. Just to add to the last question from Africa, that maybe we can consider the help of technology in more broad area. Anyway, born in Cyprus, Perikles Gnardi has made his first studies in the University of Athens, classical literature. He continued his studies in the University of Tours, France, on sociology, and the University of Sorbonne, Paris, of history. He served as advisor to the Prime Minister Andreas Papandreou on foreign policy, as director of the European Cultural Center Delphi on the invitation of the Cultural Minister Melina Mercouri, and as ambassador of the Republic of Cyprus to France on the invitation of the President of Cyprus, Tassos Papadopoulos. He has written several books on foreign policy, the political situation in Greece, and culture. He has followed closely the development in the major issue for Greece and Europe of the illegal immigration, and he has interviewed since the 90s on the issue in the mass media, start, interview, and lecture. The time the request ambassador.
Mr. Minister, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen. First question, why to discuss here about immigration, since, as I saw, the main topic of the conference is defense. Very simply, because as you have heard from the minister, the problem becomes, by its massive scale, a problem also of geopolitics and a problem of security. For this reason, it's very important to understand what is the real meaning of this phenomenon of massive immigration since the 90s, because confusing the present movement, ongoing movement of illegal immigration with the general immigration of every time is not very right, because actually there is a specific character in this phenomenon of massive immigration since the 90s, the years of 90s. Allow me for this reason to make this contribution. What is the character exactly of this movement, and to suggest afterwards few points for the necessary policies. Illegal immigration is a major international problem and a real challenge for Europe. Historically, the movement of peoples in the European continent and the Euro-Asian spaces radically changed the map of Europe under much suffering, war, and destruction of the established structures of life and society, particularly within the limits of the Greek Roman world. Obviously, we have nothing similar today in Europe, as far as concerns the scale and the character of the moving people. We have no displacement of whole peoples, but rather movement of individual illegal immigrations. The first question that we should put forward in order to understand the dynamic and the character of the present illegal immigration phenomenon, it is if there is something new and particular in this phenomenon, or if it is just an escalation of the usual causes. That means poverty and looking for a better life, and wars and physical distractions that produce refugees for safety and survival. It seems that there is something new and particular in the present phenomenon of illegal immigration. We recognize this reality by the simple fact that the real number of economic immigrants represent more of 90% of the illegal immigrants in Greece, for example. The same happens in other European countries. We recognize it also by the fact that before the years 90, there was no any illegal immigration in Greece, and that in all other European countries, immigration was under strict control and regulation. Something happened in the years 90 that changed profoundly this status. All we know that two very important events happened during those years. Firstly, the breakdown of the Soviet Union, and the opening of frontiers of the satellite countries of the so-called real socialists. We felt in Greece the consequences of this opening by the rush of more than 800 people who entered illegally to Greece. The Albanians constitute till today the largest immigration group in Greece. But the movement of illegal immigration did not stop to Albanians and other Balkan and Eastern Europe peoples. We had a new rush, more important, with a new, much more important movement from Asia, Africa, and other distant countries of the world. What was the reason and the cause of this new rush, which overflowed any concept of refugees and political asylum, as they are defined by international law, the Geneva, for example, Accord? Certainly, this sudden upsurge of illegal immigration in Europe was linked politically and ideologically, apart from the usual causes of immigration, to another very important development that happened in the years of 90. It was the policy of globalization, promoted openly and systematically by the Clinton administration in the United States. What is the real essence and content of this policy? The promotion of a world market. By what is a market consist of? Three are the main elements of a market: money, goods and services, and workforce. Consequently, the liberalization and free international circulation of money in all its forms and of goods and services should be also accompanied by progressive free circulation of workforce by some kind of opening of the frontiers. This development cannot be put forward without an accompanying ideology. We show in this respect the overextension of the concept of refugee and political asylum in order to be used as a humanistic alibi for the confusion between real refugees and economic immigrants. In the same spirit, it has been also developed the idea of global human rights that overcome frontiers and state laws and rules. Following this ideology, spread around by powerful mass media and presented as inevitable development in the present world, governments have to follow with changes in the national legislations and other adaptations. I have a personal experience in this respect. I was in the 90s political advisor for a short period to the alternative Minister of Foreign Affairs. I was very much surprised one day when the minister asked me to prepare a paper on the idea of multicultural society. I told him that the multicultural society concerned more the new countries which have been made by immigrants from all over the world, like the United States, Canada, Australia, and that represented a more flexible policy to the rigid policy of full integration. Since Greece was an homogeneous country of a national cohesion up to 97%, for what reason should Greece be concerned with multicultural policies? He told me to write down my points and to prepare for him the paper on multicultural society. Few months later, I was more surprised when he asked me to prepare another paper on the concept of flexible frontiers. Since I had a personal friendship and I could discuss freely with him, I got really angry and I asked him, what do you mean by that? Weaken the control of our frontiers. Greece is nearby the third world and has national problems with Turkey. He told me again to write down my points and to prepare the paper on the concept of flexible frontiers. The next year, 1997, Prime Minister Kostas Simitis, in a speech to a gathering in Athens of Socialist International, said, among others, Greece should become a multicultural society, a multicultural country. For what reason? For applying ideologies and policies coming from a powerful center abroad, It was the time of Clinton policies on globalism. Everybody understands how a homogeneous country becomes a multicultural country by making flexible its frontiers and allowing to enter the country foreign ethnic and religious groups, by changing also its national legislation on immigration. Greece was not an exception in Europe. European Union as a whole welcomed the globalization policies and the ideologies coming from the United States. Germany became even the flag bearer as an industrial and export-oriented country. The immigration policies followed, although there was a double state of mind in each country. On the one hand, each country did not want to get negative criticism that is not very respectful of human rights and sensible on the drama of the refugees. On the other hand, the same country wanted to push away from its own frontiers at all. Till the year 2003, immigration in the European Union was a national issue. The Greek European presidency of this year made up as one of its priorities to make immigration a European affair. Actually, two basic directives of the European Union, the one on the regime of immigrants in Europe and the other on the family reunification, have been introduced by this year. Since then, many other directives followed, among others, the directive for welcoming everybody at the European frontiers on the simple request by him of political asylum. Everybody understands the measure of misuse and abuse of this privilege. Greece and Cyprus are perfect examples of this abuse, which is being instrumentalized by both the traders of illegal immigrants and by the neighboring states like Turkey, which makes use of this opportunity for exercising pressure on Greece and Cyprus for political reasons and for gaining money from Europe. In this policy of Europe, is this policy of Europe the right one and a realistic one, or is it a pretext policy that covers an unconfessed policy of flexible frontiers commanded for obvious reasons by globalization? What is the political price of this European policy? We see already the political developments in certain European countries. France, Italy, Sweden, which are linked closely to the policies of immigration. The price is certainly not limited in the developments in those countries. It is much broader and it affects gravely many other countries in many respects. The fundamental question that Europe is faced with is the national and cultural identity of each European country and of Europe as a whole. Many thinkers in this respect make comparison between Europe and the United States. The comparison is baseless. The American unification and global society is based on individual choices. The reality in Europe is very different. In Europe, there are nations with millenary traditions and history. We should always remember that mnemosini, as we call it in Greek, the deity of memory, was the daughter of Zeus. There is no civilization without memory. For this reason, the national and cultural identities of Europe is a unique treasure of life and an existential problem for Europe. Any policy leading to some kind of replacement of population on the pretext of social and demographic data, or to denationalization and cultural alienation is not a so-called progressive enterprise ambition integrated in the global world, but a fatal blow to the history and civilization of Europe. Europe has no any reason to negate its own self and identity in order to be useful to play a major role in the world. I remember the hot discussions in the 80s in the Socialist International under the leadership of the late Willy Brandt. The first topic on the agenda in those years was the dialogue between North and South. In other terms, the rich North ought to help the development of the poor South. Why this topic has been removed from the agenda? Actually, it has been replaced by globalization. The defenders of the free trade and globalization put forward the argument that this policy is more efficient and appropriate for the development of the South. To some extent, this is true. But globalization is not just the free trade. It is also the predominance of the fiat money or small international financial elite who aspire to hegemony over states, nations, and frontiers. We have in the United States the cradle of globalization, a violent political reaction that resulted to the election of President Trump. The present also international conflict in Ukraine and the repercussions in Europe create a new situation as far as concern also the policy of globalization. We shall see in the following months what the developments in Ukraine will be, and the political developments in the United States will also be. Europe has many problems at present, and other priorities. Nevertheless, the problem of illegal immigration remains a major one because it's closely linked to its identity and future. This is even more true for Greece and Cyprus, because this problem is being instrumentalized, as I referred before, by a nearby country, Turkey. Thank you very much for your attention.
Is there any question, Mr. Basman? Thank you. Ασυλου Σαράντη is a counselor in immigration in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Formerly, she has served as agent lecturer at the Hellenic Army Academy and as part-time lecturer at the National Policy Academy, where she taught international law and international humanitarian law. She has extensive experience on the legal aspect of refugee and asylum law as former president of the Refugee Appeals Committees. She has worked as an independent consultant for the International Federation of the Red Cross and the Red Crescent, and as electoral observer in various missions of the EU and the Organization for Security and Cooperation of Europe. She has studied at the Law School of the Democratic University of Prague and the Universitat Autonoma de Barcelona, and has obtained her master's degree and PhD in international law from the Department of International and European Studies, London University. Her research interest focuses on the international law, use of force and security law, human rights, democratization, immigration, and refugee law, and international humanitarian law. Mr. Arati, please kindly request to proceed.
Thank Thank you, Admiral, for this introduction. Thank you also for the invitation to participate in this panel with distinguished speakers. Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen, the title of my intervention is Migration in the EU's Foreign Policy, from Migration Partnerships to Instrumentalization. And in the next 10 to 15 minutes, I will outline how migration fits into the EU's foreign policy. First of all, through cooperation partnerships with third countries, and secondly, through the admission agreements, and how this is affected by the geopolitical dimension of migration, in particular the instrumentalization phenomenon. The EU has a long-standing partnership history with third countries in an effort to manage migration in its source and prevent illegal flows towards the EU borders. The EU-Turkey Statement of 2016 is an example of such a partnership, although it has been agreed after the crisis and not as a purely preventive measure. When the European Commission announced its legislative proposals of the new Pact on Asylum and Migration in 2020, cooperation in third countries has been reaffirmed as a migration management strategy once again. Everything has been put on the table regarding the EU's external migration policy in an effort to build mutually beneficial partnerships. On the one hand, by enhancing and encouraging legal migration to the EU, and legal pathways for those that are in need of international protection, and on the other, by assisting third countries develop an effective migration governance and management capacity. With this objective, the last 2 years, the EU has forged action plans for cooperation with key third countries of transit and origin, with very ambitious goals, amongst others the following. First of all, combat migrant smuggling networks, not just in theory, but by forging operational cooperation. The first agreement of this kind has been concluded with Niger in July. It will build upon a former initiative, the joint investigation teams, where with EU funding, officers from services of EU member states and Niger work side by side to disrupt the business model of people smugglers and criminal networks. Other goals include strengthening the capacities of third countries to manage their borders, helping them build their asylum and reception systems, enhancing forced returns, and facilitating the voluntary returns of third country nationals to their home countries and their reintegration back to their societies. The action plans will be implemented through a series of projects that will be funded by a new instrument known by its acronym, the NDICI, which stands for Neighbourhood, Development and International Cooperation Instrument. It is a portfolio of almost 80 billion euros, covering the EU cooperation with all third countries. It constitutes the EU's main tool for the new financial period, that is 2021 to 2027, to contribute to the promotion of sustainable development, peace and stability. 10% of the 80 billion euros will be dedicated to migration. This time the migration partnerships are very ambitious operationally, but they can work only as long as you have a trustworthy partner. The first problem with the cooperation with third countries is returns of persons that do not have the right to reside on EU territory. It is an obligation stemming from general international law as well as bilateral readmission agreements. Third countries have to admit back their nationals. Unfortunately, many third countries refuse to cooperate in forced returns. Either they reject them altogether, preferring voluntary returns instead, or they stall the identification procedure. To respond to this inaction, the EU member states decided to employ negative conditionality in the form of sanctions. In the revised visa code, they decided that when a third country does not abide by its international obligations in returns, the EU will adopt several restrictive measures in the field of visas. Such measures can include reinstating the visa fee for holders of diplomatic and consular passports, deciding not to issue multiple entry visas and other measures of this kind. It is a legitimate and proportionate reaction towards countries that do not abide by their international obligations, and it is decided only after meticulous assessment of the cooperation with the third country and the potential impact on the third country itself and the external relations with the EU. Another form of negative conditionality is introduced by the Commission in the regulation proposal on the generalized scheme of tariff preferences. This legislative proposal includes a provision whereby the preferential arrangements with regard to trade may be withdrawn temporarily if the third country presents serious shortcomings related to the obligation to readmit its own nationals. It is evident that the EU and third countries need to work on returns in order to avoid initiation of negative conditionality procedures. What else can hamper the partnership with third countries in the field of migration? The instrumentalization of migrants, as we have seen it developing since 2020, first by Turkey, with the events at the border with Greece in February-March 2020, and then by Belarus at the borders with Poland, Latvia, and Lithuania in 2021, escalating especially during the summer of that year. The EU has taken very seriously this form of hybrid threat and has decided to react both at legal level and at policy level. In the Commission's proposal for a new Schengen Borders Code, we have for the first time a legal definition for instrumentalization, which largely remains a political concept and not so much a legal one. According to this definition, instrumentalization of migrants means a situation where a third country or non-state actor encourages or facilitates the movement of third country nationals to the external borders of the Union or to a member state with a specific aim: to destabilize the Union or the member state and to put at risk essential state functions, including the maintenance of law and order or the safeguard of its national security. This is also by and large the working definition for the discussions that are taking place at political level. I will focus on one aspect of the definition, the aim to destabilize. This malign intention is always present in cases of instrumentalization. We are talking about a hybrid threat, a violation not only of good neighborly relations, but also a direct violation of the prohibition of intervention in the internal affairs of another state. This is clearly forbidden by the UN Charter and may reach even the point of hybrid attack or constitute a preparatory act of an hybrid attack. Instrumentalization may be as serious as this, but it may also be a mere lack of capability to manage the flows without malign intentions whatsoever. The purpose may not always be identifiable. As such, the instrumentalization of migration is a cross-sectorial issue. It does not only trigger reactions in the justice and home affairs sector, but also in other sectors of the EU acquis, such as transports and also the EU Common Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, since sanctions against Belarus for the instrumentalization of migration have been adopted under this sector. The instrumentalization of migration challenges the delicate balance between the humanitarian and security aspects of migration. We have human beings that are abused by a state or non-state actor in order to achieve political or economic gains. As such, the challenge is to protect the security of the state and its people without undermining human rights. The EU clearly places the values of the European culture at the forefront of any discussion aiming at countering instrumentalization of migration. Now, closing this presentation, allow me to underline this. Migration is politics, and bargaining will always be part of the game. But it is not blackmail, nor is it a means to undermine the existence of another state. If migration becomes an instrument of extortion and coercion, then we enter another sphere, that of hybrid threats, and we need new tools of dealing with it. In order to prove the coercion element, we need to identify the malign intent. At that point, it it is very important to listen to the state that is victim of instrumentalization, because it is the one that can guide the European Union to understand the cohesion strategy. More than that, the instrumentalization of migration is one of the tactics to divide society, and liberal democracies are very vulnerable to that kind of hybrid threats. In the end, migration will continue as an important part of the EU's foreign policy, provided that third countries abide by their international obligations. Migration partnerships can work only if there is mutual trust. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the nice presentation. Is there any question? Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, here we conclude our presentation. I would like the President online. Thank you for your participation, and I kindly request the last afternoon applause for our participation. Enjoy Athens. Also late.